Australia currently has one of the slowest internet speeds in the developed world. Is that good enough? Don't we deserve to have the fastest in the world?
Well, David, we can have as fast an internet speed as we wish. It really depends on how much we're prepared to pay for it. Now, the real point is this. Mr Rudd is Prime Minister of Australia. He is responsible for managing the finances of this nation. He went out yesterday and said he was going to spend $43 billion on a national broadband network. He said it would be commercially viable. He said the private sector would pay for half of it. He went on television and, without a prospectus, urged Australians to invest in it. And yet we discover now that they have done no homework. They don't know how, they haven't even made an assumption about how many households will take it up. They don't know what it will cost. They have no basis for saying it's commercially viable. They're not even...
Isn't that the point of the scoping study, though?
Well, David, let me put this to you. In the real world, which your company lives in, and I live in, and Australians live in, as opposed to the la-la land Mr Rudd is in, you have to do your homework first. You don't go out and say you're going to spend $43 billion on a project without having done any homework. Today we have learned that they have done no financial modelling. This has not gone to Infrastructure Australia. They do not know what it will cost. In fact, the Finance Minister said it could cost a lot more. They don't, so $43 billion mightn't even be the right number. They don't know what people will have to pay to make it viable. And yet you've got the Prime Minister and the Treasurer out there effectively offering securities to the public for a project that they have done no homework on. Now, is that the type of recklessness that we want to see in the person of the Prime Minister of Australia?
Well, the government would argue that that's the process it's now going to go through over the next 8 or 9 months, this scoping study to answer some of those questions, and then it will presumably be urging people to invest in it.
Well,
it's simply being open and honest with us now about the process that's to come.
David, it is being completely dishonest. Let me put it this way. You work for Rupert Murdoch. Imagine if Rupert Murdoch started a new business.
Partly.
Partly. All right. Okay. All right. But imagine if Rupert Murdoch started a new media company and went out on television, went on Sky and said it's going to involve $20 billion of expenditure and it's going to be a great investment and everyone should line up and buy shares. And then the next day it was revealed that he didn't really know what it was going to cost and he hadn't done any financial modelling and he had no reliable basis for saying it was a good investment or not. He would have some very big questions to answer down at ASIC. Now, the fact of the matter is, this is and the sort of defence you've offered for Mr Rudd, I'm afraid, would do him no good at all. So the reality is, Mr Rudd says he's all against the greed and the incompetence in the business world. He is behaving in a way that would put a businessman in the hot seat at ASIC very, very quickly. This is the most reckless statement about a financial matter I've ever seen from an Australian government. This makes the Whitlam era look modest and unassuming. This is recklessness on a gigantic scale.
Let's get to what you would do then as Prime Minister. If you were Prime Minister today, would you be throwing money at Telstra to build a better broadband network? How would you approach it?
Well, I think the first thing you've got to do, which is what we were doing in government, was to address the part of Australia where the market, the free market, if you like, competitive telecom services are not going to deliver affordable broadband, and that's regional and rural Australia. And so we had a project that was funded. This is the Opal project between Optus and Elders that had a government subsidy in it of under $1 billion that would have ensured that through a mix of technologies, principally wireless and satellite, those areas would get affordable broadband. Now that is the most important objective because they are areas that are not going to be serviced otherwise. In terms of the cities, we are already seeing a range of technologies being delivered. What we need to do is to sit down with the existing providers, including Telstra, identify the areas where broadband is not being provided adequately and identify strategies that will enable it to be delivered on a cost-effective basis. You see, the thing you've got to remember here, David, is we're talking about $43 billion plus for a service, the commerciality of which has not even been assessed by the government notwithstanding, they're assuring people it's commercially viable, and they're urging Australians to invest in it. They are asking people to invest in a project which they say is a good investment, and they don't know whether it's a good, bad or indifferent investment. Now, that is not acceptable conduct.
Just to be clear, though, the current efforts that are underway on broadband, none of them involve fibre to the home, none of them involve 100 megabits per second. Are you saying 100 megabits per second is just not necessary? I mean, is it over the top? And what do you think is necessary in Australia?
Well, people can acquire whatever, should be able to buy whatever speed they're prepared to pay for. You see, the point is this, David, is 100 megabytes a second better than 10 megabytes a second? Well, obviously it is better, but how much more are you prepared to pay for it? You see, if you have a wireless card, a wireless broadband card, that gives you sufficient broadband for your purposes, you may not want to pay any more for 100 megabytes on a fixed line basis. If you have broadband, if you've currently got broadband at the moment and it's adequate to your purposes, you may not want to pay 3 or 4 or 5 times as much for a faster service. You've got to look at, if you look at the last 6 months, 650,000 people subscribed to wireless broadband, 4 times as much as took up additional take-ups of fixed line broadband. So there's a lot of technology out there. It's moving very, very quickly. You've got to remember, I was involved in the foundation of Australia's first big internet company, Aussiemail, a long time ago, 15 years ago. And so I've lived through this technological revolution. I'm passionately committed to the internet. I'm passionately committed to broadband and fast broadband. But I'm also passionately committed to ensuring that Australia's finances are managed responsibly. And what we are seeing at the moment is a Prime Minister who has no head for figures, doesn't seem to understand anything about the principles, the rules, the regulations that affect one's ability to spruik securities on television or anywhere else for that matter, and really is just spruiking this great idea as a headline grabber. How can you seriously say you're going to spend $43 billion on a project when you have done no work as to what it will really cost? You don't know what it'll cost, and you have no idea whether it is commercially viable or not. How can you responsibly urge people to invest in that? That's the question that Kevin Rudd has to answer.
Opposition Leader Malcolm Turnbull, we will have to leave it there, but thank you for joining us.
Thank you.